Hello and welcome to my channel. The subject of this video is question: who is the Supreme Lord in the Vedas? Introduction. The question. Quote, "He who is soul-giving, strength-giving, of whom even the devas wait upon instruction. Who is Lord of these bipeds and quadrupeds? To what deva may we pay worship with oblations?" Unquote. The Atharva Veda. One of the deepest sources of division that has been used to manipulate conflicts and generate violence in human history is religion. Many see this violence as their sacred duty, while others, who are revolted by such behavior, use it as an excuse to completely jettison human spirituality altogether. Both are abuses stemming from confusion. But this confusion arises from one of the most basic questions that have been asked by man since the earliest times. Who is God? Reading the Vedas, one approaches some of the oldest written records on this question in the annals of human history. However, unlike the Abrahamic faiths, it quickly becomes clear that the question of who is the Supreme Lord and who is the source of the universe are not necessarily given in a single, clearly defined, and universally applicable answer. There are apparent contradictions among the seers on these issues. But the conundrum runs even deeper. There is no textual support to identify any one deva as the Supreme Lord with certitude over all others, if the verses are read in that manner. Many verses will sing with confidence that Lord Indra is the unparalleled sovereign and king of the devas who set the constellations. Others will tell us that Lord Varuna is the king of kings and he set the constellations. Another faction will begin advocating for Lord Agni, only to be joined by pundits reciting mantras which clearly state that Lord Vishnu has all the traits of the Supreme Lord. These will find themselves in argument with those bringing solid textual proof that it is Lord Rudra who is supreme, which is, of course, the obvious truth. Is this all only the confusion of a primitive polytheism? Are these really contradictions at all? Or is there something deeper that is being communicated to us obliquely by the ancient sages? These are the questions this study will explore. I would like to note, as always, that I do not speak from any place of authority, and even if I had it, I still wouldn't speak from any place of authority. I am only sharing my own research as it stands. Also, there is certainly much more that could be said about these matters, and this should only be regarded as an introductory study on the subject. 2. The nature of the Supreme Lord. Before examining the set of data from the text regarding this subject, it is necessary to establish a working definition of what is being sought. In other words, what categories define the Supreme Lord? At its most basic, this is reducible to 4 fundamental and interrelated traits. 1. Sovereignty. 2. Omnipotence. 3. The artifactor, that this entity is the ultimate source of existence. And 4. Preserver. A. Sovereignty. The core of the definition of the title Supreme Lord is found in sovereignty. This would be defined as a total authority which is unbound by limiting factors. Philosophically speaking, he is limitless and absolutely free, autonomous in the full sense of the word. This quality of the Supreme Lord is not developed or acquired, but arises as a necessary, innate characteristic of him. The other traits, which also detail the outlines of what this being is, flow naturally from his sovereignty. B. Omnipotence. One of the primary traits is the ability to act in ways which express his pure sovereignty. Obviously, if he is limited, then he is not fully autonomous. Thus, he must be able to have the ability and latitude to exercise his inherent freedom. Here, omnipotence is not defined as a quantitative measurement of power per se, but the ability to exercise unlimited choice. This is true power. C. Creator. Another category which arises from the nature of the Supreme Lord is that he is the ultimate source of creation. That would be whatever metaphysical view one takes of the Creator and his relationship to the world. While this might be expressed poetically in the terms of a craftsman building the universe or a magician evoking it with conjurations, it is not necessary to understand this in such a literal manner, even if that may be the way it was thought of in the ancient world. As man has learned more about the nature of the universe, two metaphysical truths have become apparent. The first is that the self-generated universe of the materialist is not only logically fallacious, but built on an improbable set of recurring coincidences. The world does not work this way. Trillions of waves have washed the beaches of Earth for billions of years, and they've never made a sandcastle. On the other hand, the mythological view of an old man who speaks and the entire world system pops into existence as a polished whole, from that is also not accurate. He then runs the universe, this old man, like a cosmic Near Eastern tyrant. Both are wrong. The Vedas teach that, quote, the golden embryo was evolved at the beginning, unquote. So there is a process of creation even in the ancient Vedic texts themselves. That does not argue, as an aside, that I'm saying that they understood Darwinian theories of evolution. In a very brief summary, the world arises from consciousness and is continually unfolding construct managed by the devas. D. Preserver. By this, I do not mean as sovereign, he oversees the universe in such a manner as we would find in a deist model, but that he is responsible to it morally. The Supreme Lord is involved with the world, again, however one understands his relationship to it. In the Vedas, the universe is created for sacrifice, meaning that it is to foster a mutually nourishing relationship between man and the devas. It is this which the Supreme Lord preserves and maintains in the human sphere and the laws of nature in the natural order of the universe. This is radically different from the biblical view of sacrifice as an atonement to a wrathful divinity where man is a slave hoping for grace, whether this is the Sumerian Anunnaki or their mythological descendant Jehovah. Pardon me. That really looks bad, I know. And I'll make it worse. Pardon me while I take a drink of my freshly made persimmon and pear juice. I'm a big fan of juicing and raw milks. Part 1. Examination of the mantras in the Vedas. 1. The candidates. Having established our categories of analysis, we will proceed to apply these to the mantras of the Vedas, which attribute to the various devas the role of Supreme Lord. After compiling these verses, I made a rough percentage of the numbers of mantras attributing the sovereignty and the role of creator to various devas worshipped with these titles. The top 3, which we will consider in greater detail, are Lord Indra, Lord Agni, and Lord Varuna. 1. Lord Indra. By far, with roughly 45% of the mantras on the subject, the deva who is praised most often with the title of Supreme Lord in the Vedas is Lord Indra. When examined with the categories established to define the Supreme, it is found that he has a number of verses in harmony with each category. A. Sovereignty. The Rig and Sama Vedas. In both the Rig and Sama Vedas, there are a myriad of verses praising Lord Indra as the sovereign ruler of the universe. He is called the best of beings and the Lord of living beings. He is also hailed as the king of men. And in the Samaveda, they sing that he controls men. Beyond this, he is also acclaimed as the king of devas, who gives all of the devas, it is said, give precedence to him and seek his friendship. Quote, he who bestows upon the man who offers him oblations, he is the undisputed sovereign, Indra, Swaha, unquote. The adjective undisputed is pretty clear. Perhaps this is why it is said of him that there is none more glorious, and that 100 sons were not a match for him even at his birth. The Atharva Veda. The final book of the Atharva Veda, Kanda 20, is completely dedicated to Lord Indra. In this, he is praised for his famous defeat of the powerful celestial Asura Vrita and called upon to drink the Soma to bestow blessings on the community. His sovereignty is also frequently asserted. And in this book, he is interestingly praised as the administrator of the world. Here too, he is of course the Lord of Devas and the bearer of the thunderbolt. He is also the king of all living organisms in heaven and also on earth. Omnipotence. Lord Indra is also attributed with omnipotence. The seers tell us no deva is stronger than Lord Indra. When he assumes a wrathful form, all the devas are in fear of him due to his tremendous power. In respect to him, as mentioned previously, all other devas seek his friendship. Quote, the resplendent and every way unlimited Indra, drinking the spiritless Soma juice, far surpasses the elements, far exceeds the devas in power. He is more vast than heaven and earth, or the widespread, spacious firmament. Unquote. Pardon me. This verse is just one of a large numbers of mantras in the Vedas which attribute omnipotence to Lord Indra. Creator. There are also numerous mantras attributing to Lord Indra the title of creator, generally speaking, as well as specific acts of creation. Quote, who fixed the heaven in unsupported space and filled the spacious firmament and heaven and earth with light. He it is who upheld and has made the earth renowned. In the exhilaration of Soma, Indra has done these things. He it is who has measured the eastern quarter with measures like a chamber, who has dug with the thunderbolt the beds of rivers, and has easily sent them forth by long continued paths. In the exhilaration of Soma, Indra has done these things. Unquote. As the primary artifactor of the world, he is said to have spread out heaven and earth and made the constellations stable. To repeat myself from earlier, this is metaphorical, and I personally do not think some giant divine hand popped the stars into place akin to a cosmic light bright, which was a popular children's game for those who may be in the subcontinent and not know what that was. I understand this as management of a process. D. Preserver. It is also found that Lord Indra is called the sustainer of the world and responsible to ensure the social order. He is concerned not only with the natural order, but as benefactor to man is concerned for the well-being of human society as well. Quote, may Indra, who is the cherisher of men, the benefactor of mankind, the Lord of men, the adored of many, come to us. Come down to me for my preservation. Unquote. We read in the hymns that Lord Indra gives laws to men. Whether this is legal or ritual is not defined in the Vedas. We find only statements such as Lord Indra slays the robber. It may be that this was simply assumed and would not thus have been made the subject of the hymns by the seers. The only other reference found to law is the desire on the part of the sages to spread the Aryan law across the land. As one final note, the trait of omniscience is attributed to Lord Indra, who is said to be the wisest of beings and to know all things. 2. Lord Agni. Fire is central to the Vedic sacrificial system. It is therefore not surprising that the entity which is the personification of this energy in creation would be regarded as supreme. Roughly 25% of the mantras praise him as such in the Vedas. Sovereignty. Quote, they propitiate the wise, the manifesting, the sustaining, the enlightener of the pious, the giver of happiness, the sovereign of heaven and earth. I glorify with hymns the ancient and mighty works of Agni, the demolisher of cities. Unquote. The seers explicitly tell us that Agni is the supreme sovereign and the Lord of all. He is also given the role of chief of the devas, and in line with the authority one finds with the title of Supreme Lord, he is also the Lord of men as well. He is also praised in that role as the wise Lord of human beings. Thus, all the epithets applied to Lord Indra are shared by Lord Agni. B. omnipotence. Omnipotence is also a trait of both these devas. The sages praise Lord Agni as the destroyer and restorer of all. In the same manner, he is said to be more powerful than all other devas. Quote, "We worship for prosperity, you who are the invoker of the devas, the many-colored conveyance of the sacrifice, the brilliant banner of every offering, the surpasser of every deva in might, the guest of man." Unquote. In the language of the Samaveda, he is called invincible. C. Creator. Lord Agni is also called the creator of the universe. The sages teach that he generated all beings as well as the world. Quote, "Agni, creator, to you who are wise, acquainted with the past, I address, O sage, these soliciting mysterious words." Unquote. D. Preserver. You have ever sustained Agni, both heaven and earth, as a son supports his parents. Unquote. Lord Agni is called not only the creator, but the sustainer of the world as well. This is presented in the hymns with the traditional image so familiar from both Lord Krishna and Jesus Christ as the herdsman or shepherd of the human race. Quote, "You watch over all creatures as a herdsman over his cattle. Be willing, Vaishvanarava, to requite our praises, and do you cherish us ever with blessings." Unquote. Finally, omnipresence is also attributed to Lord Agni. Three, Lord Varuna. The deva who is celebrated as Supreme Lord in roughly 10% of the mantras, and the third most common is Lord Varuna. In the later Puranas, his role is predominantly that of the Lord of the water element and the direction of the west. In the modern fire rituals, the Homa, he is invoked immediately after Lord Ganesha to purify the ritual space. However, especially in the Rig Veda, he has a much larger role to fulfill in the management of the universe. He is associated with the setting sun and the night sky. A. Sovereignty. Quote, "He, Varuna, the acceptor of holy rites, the doer of good deeds, he sat down among the divine progeny to exercise supreme dominion over them." Unquote. In a number of hymns, the seers tell us that Lord Varuna is sovereign over all. He is also addressed as the chief monarch. Further, he is given the title imperial ruler of the world. This role is reinforced with such epithets as King of Kings. The sages of the Atharva Veda tell us this Asura, meaning here divine lord, not the etheric species, bears rule over the devas. B. Omnipotence. In the cases of Lord Varuna, of Lord Indra and Lord Agni, there are explicit attributions of omnipotence to them in the Vedas. This is not so clear with Lord Varuna. For example, this quote, "I am the King Varuna. On me the devas bestow those principal energies that are destructive to asuras. I have done all these deeds. No one resist my divine vigor. Unquote. This verse describes the energetic relationship between Lord Varuna and the other devas over whom he is seen as sovereign. There are perhaps two ways to read this. One is that this is referring to a type of tribute given to him. The second is that the devas surrender their energy, or Shakti, as it is called in tantric thought, to him, and this would make him, theoretically speaking, omnipotent, even if it does not rise innately from his own nature. However, given our definition of sovereignty, this is problematic, as this is not an acquired title, nor is omnipotence, but an innate aspect of the Supreme Lord's being as such. C. Creation. In the Vedas, there are sages who praise Lord Varuna as the creator, and specifically as the maker of the earth. Quote, "He who is visible above the earth sustains the points of the horizon, is the measurer of the universe. This is the ancient abode of Varuna, to which we have access. He is our Lord." Unquote. Another aspect of creation, for which he is praised by the seers, presents a direct contradiction with mantras attributing this action specifically to Lord Indra. Quote, "Permanent in greatness are the births of that Varuna who propped up the vast heaven and earth, who appointed by their twofold task the glorious sun and the beautiful constellations." Undoubtedly, one could parse the meaning of the verbs here to smooth this over or find other resolutions, but it's not clear that this fully resolves the issue. D. Preserver. The role of sustainer, as he who maintains the three worlds, is clearly attributed to Lord Varuna, but his most prominent aspect as the sustainer is his overlordship of the human moral order. It is for this that he is most praised and worshipped in the Vedas. In particular, the infamous fetters of Varuna, which bind the sinner. Quote, "From family sickness, kinsman's curse, from destruction, from Varuna's noose, I free and save thee." Unquote. Lord Varuna, along these lines, also frees the sinner from guilt and karma. This role is fulfilled by him through all the Vedic text. Quote, "Cast off my sin, Varuna, as if it were a rope. May we obtain from you a channel filled with water. Cut not the thread of me engaged in weaving pious works. Blight not the elements of holy rites before the season of their maturity." Unquote. Lord Varuna is also praised as the sustainer of the universe, and in harmony with this, he is also cast in the role of the herdsman of the human race. Quote, "He who, visible above the earth, sustains the points of the horizon, is the measure of the universe. That is the abode of Varuna, to which we have access. He is our Lord, like the keeper of cattle. May all our enemies perish." Unquote. Four. Others. A. Soma. Mathematically, with roughly estimated 9% of the mantras with the attribution of universal sovereignty, is Soma. Overwhelmingly, these verses are found in the ninth mandala of the Rig Veda, which is completely dedicated to the Soma in all aspects. There, Soma is called the universal Lord and sovereign. Quote, Soma, the sovereign of the universal of the universe, flows forth. Surpassing the sages, he desired the worship of the all-seeing truth. He who is cleansed by the rays of the sun, the father of praise, the unequaled sage. Unquote. The Soma is also praised by the sages as the Lord of Devas, as well as the Lord of all beings. B. The Trimurti. In modern Hinduism, several devas which were more in the background in the Vedic era have assumed more forefront or direct roles. They came to be understood by the sages as a trinity of beings which emerged from a single emanation of the divine to play a critical role in the management of the multiverse as it exists through all the realms of being. This is called the Trimurti. It consists of Lord Brahma, the creator, Lord Vishnu, the preserver, and Lord Shiva, the destroyer. Most commonly in this era, specifically Lord Vishnu and Lord Shiva are the ones who fill the role of Supreme Lord to their devotees. They are present in the Vedas, but due to the nature of the ritual activity of the seers of that era, with their emphasis on real-world results from sacrifice, the Trimurti, while there, was more in the background. 1. Lord Rudra. The supreme personality of Godhead Lord Shiva, not that I'm in any way biased, is manifest in the Vedas in his form of Lord Rudra. The seers sing his praises as the chief of beings as well as the supreme ruler. Quote, firm with strong limbs, assuming many fierce forms, the tawny colored, he shines with brilliant golden ornaments. Vigor is inseparable from Rudra, the supreme ruler and lord of this world. Unquote. Not only is he attributed with supremacy, but also omnipotence as the mightiest and the most powerful. Another trait of the Supreme Lord with which he is honored is that of the preserver. But Lord Rudra is not an Aditya, and in the Vedic era he was more on the outskirts of the ritual system. 2. Lord Vishnu. In the Vedas, Lord Vishnu shares all these traits. He holds the supreme station of heaven. He is also the Lord of all who made the world. Thus, he can be categorized as both the sovereign and the creator. His role as the sustainer or preserver is frequently emphasized by the sages. In fact, he alone is explicitly identified with Rita, or the cosmic order. Quote, he causes by his gyrations 94 periodic revolutions, like a circular wheel, vast of body and evolving in many forms, through the praises addressed to him. Unquote. An imagery familiar to those that know the Bhagavad Gita. In the Vedic rituals, if the Brahmins are the devas and the sacrifice is the creation, then the ritual itself is an expression of Lord Vishnu. This metaphorically represents his relationship with the universe. C. The sun, Lord Surya. Not surprisingly, the sun, Lord Surya, is viewed by some seers in the Vedas as the Supreme Lord. Given that all life on the planet is absolutely dependent upon him, and he is seen as the soul of all living things, this is a rational choice. Some today, among them the more traditional Blackfoot Indians, regard the sun as the creator and supreme lord. Quote, Surya spreads his vast and numerous rays over all the crowds of men, shining bright of day. He is beheld by all the same, the creator. He is glorified by his worshippers. Unquote. In another hymn of the Rig Veda, Lord Surya is said to be the lord of every individual moving or stationary thing. The sages of the Atharva Veda further identify him as Rohita, the ruddy one, a form of Prajapati, or the generative principle in creation. Quote, the ruddy one, Rohita, made firm heaven and earth. By him the firmament, by him the atmosphere, the spaces were measured out. By him the devas discovered immortality. Unquote. In another verse of the same hymn, quote, the ruddy one, Rohita, became time. The ruddy one in the beginning was Prajapati. The ruddy one becomes the world. Unquote. D. Miscellaneous. There are a surprising variety of devas and even rudras which are seen as Supreme Lord, Creator, or said to have rulership over mankind. In a hymn in the Atharva Veda, which is strikingly similar in its concepts to the classical Orphic hymns, the deva of desire, Lord Kama, who is akin to the Greek Eros, is adorned as supreme. Quote, first of all sprang Kama into being. Devas, fathers, mortal men have never matched him. Stronger than these art thou, and greater forever, Kama. To thee I offer worship. Unquote. Lord Brahshpati, yes, regarding whom there is some dispute if he is identical to the planet Jupiter, is also called Supreme Lord. Lord Parjanya is on this list as well, not only as the augmenter of plants, but as the metaphysical ground of being. Quote, in whom all beings exist, the three worlds abide, from whom the waters flow in three directions, east, west, and south. The three water-shedding masses of clouds pour the waters round the mighty Parjanya. Unquote. In the role of creator alone, one finds both Lord Vishwakarma, who is a form of Brahma, and Prajapati. Part 2. Examination of the categories of reconciliation. Introduction. Obviously, some devas meet more of the criteria established than others, at least based on what is presented in the text. However, that does not palliate the fundamental contradictions found within the hymns. This method still leaves rivals for the title when inherently there can be only one who is truly supreme. One way of looking at this data is to tally the mantras, and whoever has the most wins. But this mathematical abstraction neglects the nature of the statements themselves. The predicate of supremacy implies one. One claim is not invalidated simply because there are also 10 others. Therefore, we will need to seek some other redress for this issue. There are 4 main arguments which could be found to resolve these contradictions. It is to these that we now turn. 2. Categories of reconciliation. Category 1. None are supreme. A. Argument. The first possibility to be examined is that there is no Supreme Lord as such in the Vedas. This title is merely a poetic appellation of praise used for whoever is being invoked by the Brahmins at that time. In other words, it is a ritual formula. This explains both the contradictory use of this epithet as well as its application, as well as other titles which would not obviously seem to fit. For example, Lady Usas, the Dawn, is also called supreme, which seems odd for a transitory atmospheric phenomena depending on the much greater sun. Pardon me. Quote, "The supreme sovereign, the opulent Usas has risen, the divine daughter of heaven, most prompt in movement, bestows treasures on the pious worshipper." Unquote. Another unexpected attribution to lordship is in the case found over mankind. That is, the Ashvins. The divine twins are Rudras, not devas, as they were once human. How could they be more august than Lord Agni, also called the Lord of Men, or especially the firstborn of the Aditya, Lord Indra? Yet, the sages grant them this title. Quote, "With that chariot, lords of men, which is your vehicle, which has 3 benches, is laden with wealth, and is the precursor of day." Unquote. B. Critique. The problem with this answer is that if it were true that whomever the Brahmins were addressing was acting as de facto supreme, or simply flattered as such, then this formula would appear through the highly privileged Soma sacrifice proclaimed to all who received the cups of Soma. Yet it does not. There is not a list of those designated as supreme in these verses in the Yajurveda, so this is not consistent with the idea of a ritual formula. Finally, the sages are clear that there is a Supreme Lord. The contradiction is in the text regarding the identity of who fulfills this office rather than that it exists at all. Category 2. All are supreme. A. Argument. The second possibility is that the adjective supreme is not as narrow as might be assumed in its general definition. Thus, all the devas are supreme in that they have a managerial relationship to the material universe and man. To man, the hierarchical relationship within the world of the devas is secondary, since they are all, by virtue of the nature of their beings, sovereign in their relationship to us. Their supremacy might also be defined as their role in specific spheres of activity. There is a basis for this approach in the text. For example, speaking of the Adityas in general, it is said that they are sovereign. Quote, "Worshipped with fat libations, lords of gift, Adityas, sovereign kings. They wait on him whose life is true, unquote. There are also statements which speak of two devas as opposed to a large group in these same terms. Quote, attending to the summons at the time of battle, you, Indra and Agni, surpass all in magnitude. You are vaster than the earth, than the sky, than the rivers and the mountains. You exceed all other existent things, unquote. In the Samaveda, a similar verse refers to Lord Indra and Soma in the same manner. It is possible, therefore, to read this term in a broader manner in some circumstances, at least, within the Vedas. B. Critique. This is problematic as both the same titles and even activities are attributed to multiple devas, even if some seem more predominant. For example, Lord Vishnu is most frequently identified as the preserver, but this is shared with others and is not his alone. There does not seem to be tight corporate roles in the Vedas. Even if the devas may all appear omnipotent to us, given the limitations of the human realm, ritually they are not all treated in this way, and their hierarchy is both expressed and respected. For example, Lord Indra always receives the largest share of the Soma sacrifice. Finally, while there are examples of this term being used more loosely than usual within natural language, this is not the only way it is used in the Vedas, as there are also, of course, references to one Supreme Lord who is the ultimate source of creation. Category 3, Tribal Traditions. A. Argument. A third approach to potentially reconcile these contradictions is the argument that they reflect tribal or clan traditions. The later sage Patanjali tells us that there were 121 recitations of the Yajurveda, no doubt reflecting the variety of practices among the various clans of the Brahmins. Even in the Brahmanas, there were already distinctions. This may have extended beyond the ritual to whom the ritual is addressed. This would also be consistent with the situation as it exists in modern India. Many families have traditions of devotion to some particular deva and regard him or her as the supreme personality of Godhead. B. Critique. I favored this model and conceived of a way to test its accuracy. Within the Rig Veda, the scholarly consensus among Westerners at least is that mandalas 2 through 7 represent the older strata. They are called the family books in the hymns, as each of these cycles are predominantly the compositions of one clan. Thus, if there were clan traditions of worshipping one particular deva as the Supreme Lord, it should be reflected within these mandalas. However, this hypothesis is wrong. Now, I apologize to the viewer that I cannot create and show a graph here. So I will just briefly cite some examples, as it would be quite easy to lose this when trying to just listen to it. So in the second mandala, there are 3 attributions to Lord Indra, 2 to Agni, 2 to Varuna, and 8 to others. In the third, 4 to Varuna, 1 to Agni, 1 to Varuna. In the fourth, 2 to Indra, 2 to Agni, 1 to Varuna. In the fifth, 1 to Indra, 2 to Agni, 4 to Varuna. In the sixth, 6 to Indra, 1 to Agni, 10 to others. And in the seventh mandala, 2 to Indra, 2 to Agni, and 2 to Varuna, and none to others. Analyzing this data, there is no consistent pattern correlating worship of a specific deva as supreme within the Brahmin clans that wrote these mandalas. Thus, this is not the answer. Category 4. Chronological development. A. Argument. The fourth attempt to reconcile these contradictory verses is to assert that they represent a theological evolution. This developmental analysis is highly favored in Western academic settings because it is adaptable to support their various and sundry preconceived theories, whatever they may be. You can always work it in there somehow. The claim is made by MacDonald, for example, that Lord Indra was the aboriginal head of the Aryan pantheon. Over time, as society shifted, of course, in his view, through conquest in the myth of the Aryan invasion theory, he was replaced by the more aggressive Lord Indra. There is some basis for this speculation both within the text and the transformation within Hinduism between the Vedas and the Puranas. In the 7th mandala of the Rig Veda, which is one of the older family books, as we mentioned, the seers tell us that there were more ancient deities who came to honor Lord Indra. Quote, "The older deities have confessed your vigor superior to their destructive strength, Indra. Having subdued his foes, gives rich spoils to his worshippers." Unquote. If one assumes that Lord Agni as the primeval fire and Lord Varuna as a form of the sun, that, as they argue it, represents the older gods, then this might serve as a basis to explain these contradictions. The argument would then be asserted that this process continued into the era of the Puranas. Within these legends, Lord Indra is reduced from his position as the imperial overlord of the devas into something of a local satrap who is often tripped up by his own arrogance and must run to Lord Vishnu or to the Supreme Lord Mahadeva to save him from his own mistakes. B. Critique. However, in the Rig Veda, Lord Varuna is one of the Adityas and hence is one of Lord Varuna's younger brothers, as he is the firstborn of the Adityas. It seems improbable that he could be one of the older deities mentioned. Some mantras will say Agni is the youngest of the devas, while others, probably referring to Agni as a form of Purana and Chi and not the celestial deva, will say that he is the oldest. The identity and role of these older deities is unclear and thus is not a basis to construct evolutionary theories. Part 3. Towards Reconciliation. The Abstract Hymns. In looking to reconcile this question, it is discovered the texts themselves provide important indications which reflect the nature of the divine and its relationship to man and the universe. It is in this that the resolution is to be found. The first mantra reveals to us a key element of understanding the nature of the devas. Quote, O Soma Pavamana, you are the thrice 11 universal devas abiding in the secret heaven. Unquote. The devas are emanations of the same source and are fundamentally expressions of a deeper unity that is a secret or not readily apparent. This is identified as Soma. This is not the ephedra plant used in the Vedic rituals, but refers to the yogic Soma, which is consciousness. Thus, the seers of the Rig Veda teach that the devas are all different modes of the same core awareness. The sages carry this worldview even further by teaching that not only the immaterial realm of the devas, but the physical universe itself is the manifestation of one being whom they identify as the goddess. Quote, Aditi is heaven. Aditi is the firmament. Aditi is mother, father, and son. Aditi is all the devas. Aditi is the 5 classes of men. Aditi is generation and birth. Unquote. This is refined in the Atharva Veda in a paean where the goddess in her form as Vak or speech, meaning here the vibratory sounds from which all existence ultimately arises, reveals her nature to us. Quote, I, the goddess speaking, travel with the Rudras and the Vasus. With the Adityas and all devas I wander. I hold aloft both Varuna and Mitra. I hold aloft Indra and both the Ashvins. I am the queen, the gatherer up of treasures, most thoughtful, first of those who merit worship. Through me all eat the food that feeds them. Every man who sees, breathes, hears the word outspoken. They know it not, but they dwell beside me. Hear, one and all, the truth as I declare it. Unquote. What applies to the realm of the devas and the natural world also applies naturally to man, both as a species and as an individual. The divine is not only expressed in the other realm and separate from the material universe, but in man as well. All is the goddess and all is divine. Behind the devas, behind nature, and behind man, there is that which is, as it is truly in itself, and this includes behind the goddess, ineffable. Pardon me. We may call this Soma, Indra, or Vishnu, but these are only relative names and identifications, for it is beyond all of them in itself. This doctrine is taught clearly even in the oldest sections of the Vedas. It is a common assumption among academic Westerners that there is a chronological development and that abstract concepts in hymns are only historically later. This is not the case. Quote, He is Hamsa, the sun, dwelling in light. Vasu, the wind, dwelling in the firmament. The invoker of the devas, Agni, dwelling on the altar. The dweller among men as consciousness. Unquote. Here the divine is identified with Chaitanya, or consciousness within man directly, rather than through the esoteric symbolism of the Soma. The seers express the ineffable with the eternal question asked by so many: who is the ungod, the unknown God? This is done by taking the Sanskrit interrogative ka, meaning who, and transforming it into a proper noun, also ka. This entity, identified with consciousness, is the true Supreme Lord, described as abstractly and simply as human language is able to express the concept beyond all variations and permutations. Quote, "In the beginning rose Hiranyagava, born only Lord of all created beings. He fixed and holdeth up this earth and heaven. What God shall we adore with our oblations? Giver of vital breath, of power and vigor, he whose commandments all the devas acknowledge, the Lord of death, whose shade is immortal life. What deva shall we adore with our oblations? Ka, by his grandeur, hath become sole ruler of all the moving world that breathes and slumbers. He is the God of gods, and none besides him. What deva shall we adore with our oblations?" Unquote. This same view is shared within the Western Hermetic tradition. This is the metaphysical ground for the ceremonial grimoire, the Key of Solomon. In this text, the context for magical operations is set by the recognition of the fundamental unity of the microcosm and the macrocosm in the invocation of the entity called the Bornless One. It is only from here, within the temple that is his own self, with a capital S, that the magician works. Quote, "Thee I invoke, the Bornless One, thee that didst create the heaven and the earth, thee that didst create night and day. This is the Lord of the gods, this is the Lord of the universe. I am he, the bornless spirit. I am he, the truth." Counterpoint: the cults of the Dasyus. A consistent study of the data, however, does leave a serious challenge to this universalist view. It may very well be that they whom the Greeks call the Dioscuri, the seers would call the Ashvins, or they whom the Celts called Lug, the Vedic sages called Surya. Perhaps Lord Varuna is identifiable with Uranus or Poseidon. However, this is not sufficient to classify the Vedic seers as Unitarian Universalist. They were not. Through the hymns, the sages were quite clear that the cults of the Dasyus were false and that the gods that they worshipped were false gods. Whomever the Dasyus may have been is a secondary consideration to this aspect of the discussion. They did not say that all religions and all religious practices are of equal value or worth. Quote, "Slay everyone who offers no libations, however difficult to be destroyed. Slay everyone who is not a delight to you, Lord Indra. Bestow upon us their wealth." Unquote. The defining trait of the Vedic rites is the sacred fire or Lord Agni. Cults which do not incorporate this element into their worship were regarded as barbaric by the sages. May Agni utterly confound those dasyos who perform no sacred rites, who are babblers, defective in speech, niggards, unbelievers, not honoring Agni, i.e., not performing rituals based on fire, offering no sacrifices. Agni preceding has degraded those who institute no such ceremonies, unquote. This does go beyond merely neglecting the use of fire. The clear statement of indictment against the dasyos is the practice of cannibalism. The details are beyond this study, but suffice it to say that there are limits to what the sages viewed as an acceptable approach to the divine in human worship and the human social order. Conclusions. The chosen God. The Supreme Lord is wherever the individual recognizes his presence in an elevating manner. In studying this issue, this is the teaching which appears to emerge from the Vedas. The seers tell us that this unknown God, Ka, it dwells among us as our own consciousness, but if we cannot perceive this, then it is also possible to discover this in the natural world or in celestial beings, which would be their preferred manner. There are strong reasons to accept that this was the view of the Vedic seers. We know that their choice of worship of the divine was not tribal, so there must, at the very least, have been very strong personal elements in it. It should be noted, there is an absence of any dispute over these matters within the hymns of the Vedas. No sage criticizes another for worshipping Lord Agni as the Supreme Lord over Lord Varuna, for example. Although each makes very definite, universal, and contradictory claims about their respective personal and chosen gods. There is no chauvinism for the devas. The reason for this tolerance is based on the recognition that it was something much deeper than any individual expression of the divine that they were truly worshipping. One must follow one's heart in finding one's path to the divine in an elevated manner, and to eventually discover that we are not a boat on an ocean seeking some distant horizon. We are already the horizon itself. We're already there. We just need to learn to recognize it. The followers of Abrahamic faiths will undoubtedly seize upon this in an attempt to establish their own personal gods as impeachable objective truth by contrasting what they would call the simplicity and purity of their own messages against this Vedic obscurity. Historically, however, this is the exact opposite. Jehovah was just one of a number of Canaanites' gods and was elevated by the later Hebrews to claims of cosmic proportion, just as Allah was one among many pre-existing gods in the Kaaba, similarly elevated by Muhammad and Muslims. The divinity of the abstract hymns of the Vedas has always been above such historical and culturally conditioned transformations. Thank you very much.